By 8300 BC, the engineering lineage identified at Göbekli Tepe had shifted its focus. While the Anatolian pillars represented a mastery of joinery, the art of locking two parts together, the next challenge for this advancing technology was that of volume and verticality. As the group migrated south into the Levant, they would have sought a location that provided both climatic stability and a strategic anchor for their technical standards. They found it at the Jericho Oasis. Situated 800 feet below sea level in the Jordan Rift Valley, Jericho is one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements on Earth. But beneath the layers of biblical myth and Bronze Age ruins lies a pre-pottery Neolithic A structure that defies every convention of primitive architecture: the Tower of Jericho. My name is Evan Flay, and this is part 2 of a 10-part journey to track perhaps the single most advanced technical lineage of our ancient past. From the mountains of Anatolia to the plains of Giza, we are going to reconstruct the lost history of the group that built the world. Welcome to Fire and Stone. Archaeology usually classifies the PPNA period as a time of simple, round, mud brick huts. The inhabitants, they say, were transitioning from hunting to early cultivation. But in this context, the Tower of Jericho represents more of a physical impossibility. It's a massive circular stone structure that stands almost 30 feet tall with a diameter of 9 meters at the base and 7 meters at the top. And the tower itself wasn't built with bricks. It was constructed using undressed field stones and mud mortar. However, the external simplicity does mask a more sophisticated internal geometry. Because to build a stone cylinder of this mass without the structure just collapsing under its own weight requires a foundational understanding of things like vertical load bearing, a skill that mainstream history claims wasn't perfected for several more millennia. The most startling feature of the tower is not its height, but its internal staircase. Carved into the heart of the 9-meter wide stone mass is a precision engineered corridor containing 22 stone steps. This is the earliest currently known example of a purpose-built staircase in human history. Building an internal cavity inside a massive stone structure is an engineering nightmare. Every step taken upwards increases the pressure on the void below. The builders were either unbelievably lucky, or they had to calculate the specific thickness of the tower walls to ensure the internal passage didn't just pinch or cave in. Because here's the thing, you can't just add a staircase to a stone tower later. The staircase must be part of the initial blueprint. This strongly suggests that before the first stone was laid at Jericho, an architect had already calculated the slope, the riser height of each step, and the structural support needed for the ceiling. The staircase itself is roofed with massive flat stone slabs. These weren't just simply laid flat, they were angled to distribute the downward force of the tower's upper layers away from the staircase and into the external walls, which is the same relieving chamber logic that we see used nearly 6,000 years later in the Great Pyramid of Giza. And as for the steps, they were hammered into a smooth, uniform finish, which suggests that the builders weren't just concerned with function, they were adhering to an aesthetic standard that demanded precision. For decades, mainstream archaeology labeled the structure a watchtower or a defensive bastion. However, a closer look at the site layout reveals this to be highly unlikely. First of all, at the time the tower was completed, there was no defensive wall surrounding the settlement. It stood in relative isolation. Second, the staircase is located on the inside of the settlement's perimeter, and the entrance is at the bottom and pointing inward. A defensive tower would typically have its entrance elevated or at least restricted to prevent an enemy from simply walking in. Instead, the tower appears to have been a technical monument. Some researchers have noted that on the summer solstice, the shadows of the nearby mountains fall directly onto the tower before covering the rest of the settlement. This could suggest that the tower may have also acted as a kind of solar anchor, a physical marker used to calibrate the calendars of the technical elite. In part 1, we saw the builders at Göbekli Tepe using mortise and tenon joinery to lock stones together. At Jericho, we see the next logical step in that mathematical progression. The tenon joints in Turkey were about stability in 2D space. The staircase in Jericho is about access in 3D space. The people had moved from asking, how do we make two stones stay together, to How do we create a hollow space inside a mountain of stone without it falling? This transition is critical because it represents the birth of internal architecture. The ability to create corridors, chambers, and staircases inside a megalithic mass is the exact skill set required to build the interior of something like the Great Pyramid. The Tower of Jericho is essentially the proof of concept for the King's Chamber, built almost 6,000 years early. Who has the time to spend decades building a 28-foot stone tower with an internal staircase in 8300 BC? Not a hunter-gatherer, not even a simple farmer. Similar to Göbekli Tepe, a project of this scale requires a permanent division of labor. It requires an architect to hold the blueprints, a foreman to oversee the masonry, and a logistics officer to ensure the workers are fed. The Tower of Jericho is physical proof of a hierarchical technical guild. This guild wouldn't have just built for the sake of construction, though. They would have been anchoring their presence in the Levant. They would have been signaling that this was now a permanent territory of the Pillar Keepers. By building one of the tallest known man-made structures of its time, built at the lowest inhabitable elevation on Earth, they would have been making a statement of absolute technical dominance. As the population at Jericho grew and the ability to build vertically was refined, the group would have begun to outgrow the Jordan Valley. They had advanced the art of the high-rise and the geometry of the internal void, but the field stones of Jericho were a limited medium. To continue progressing, they would have needed better stone, harder limestone, basalt, and granite. They would have needed a location that combined maritime trade with high-altitude quarries, a place where they could move from building towers to building entire platforms on an incomprehensible scale. What this strongly suggests is that this culture didn't disappear after the tower was finished. They headed west, toward the Mediterranean coast, to a site that would become the logistical heart of the ancient world. Next time, we investigate the city of Byblos. We will examine the forensic evidence of the world's first high-tech city, featuring crushed limestone floors and sophisticated urban planning, and how this coastal hub served as the launch pad for one of the most significant megalithic projects in human history. And finally, do me a favor, guys. Hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're really not going to want to miss this. There's more episodes coming out soon. If you want to get caught up, go ahead and click subscribe and find the Giza Project playlist.